when we visited Leicester, when we spoke to community members, when we spoke to Hindu community members and Muslim community members living specifically in the LE5 area of Leicester, we realized that this was an ongoing community cohesion breakdown that really had started a lot earlier in the year. And what became evident quite quickly was a community cohesion breakdown between predominantly Muslim and Hindu young males had been narrated as an infiltration of Hindutva extremism and RSS terrorism from the subcontinent, which had created a wider threat to the Hindu community across the country. And although there was definitely religio prejudice between Muslim and Hindu young males in Leicester, there was not as yet, with the evidence to hand, RSS terrorism or an infiltration of Hindutva extremism organized groups in Leicester. And a little bit, if any of you are unaware of what I mean by RSS or Hindutva, I'm sure if you've been following this series of events, you've become quite familiar with what that is. But Hindutva has various different understandings, simply from Hinduness and expressions of Hinduness through to a extreme idea of Hindu supremacy that can harbor anti-Muslim sentiment. So the understanding of that term kind of differs from that simple understanding of Hinduness through to something that's more extreme. And RSS is described by some as a paramilitary male voluntary group in India that has links to violence, has been linked to anti-Muslim violence. But the extent to which that is present in the UK is very tenuous. It's not a prescribed terrorist organization in the UK. And we call at the end of our briefing for further research into the area, but we did not find a risk of RSS terrorism or RSS terrorists in Leicester. So how did we come to this conclusion? We had to look at where the direct claims were being leveled. So there was a direct claim of a group of young Hindu men being RSS terrorists. So we made contact with that group of young men. And also actually later on Channel 4 made contact with them and interviewed them also. Our interviews were very similar to the Channel 4 interview, if you saw that one. And these young men had a very interesting story to tell. And I do think that their story is indicative really of what happened in Leicester. We found far more evidence to back this up, but their story in the time I have is the important story to tell. So these young men are from an area in Gujarat called, there's two areas, Diu and Daman in the northwest coast in the state of Gujarat. And these young men are from this area. They're part of a relatively new migratory group into the UK, quite often speaking Gujarati or Portuguese, some English language challenges there. And they tend to hold a lot of Hindu festivals. They're very outward, projecting of their Hinduism. And they struggled to find themselves accepted in Leicester. They felt there was a lot of pushback against their festivals. There were complaints when we spoke to members of the Muslim community in the area, complaints of noise, festivals going on late into the night, alcoholism, antisocial behavior. And on the other side, speaking to members of this community, there was a sense, these are our festivals, we should be allowed to have them. And this was the kind of bubbling tension that we were understanding there to be. And the kind of background of attacks between Muslim and Hindu youth with this religious prejudice going on. So we fast forward to the beginning of September, and these young men in question have their Hindu festival egged, and at least one has reported a stabbing, and the Channel 4 interview showed his wounds and discussed the stabbing incident with him. These are the young men that are being branded as RSS terrorists. And these are also, very interestingly, the young men that organized the Hindu March. So we were then able to see the flyer that they used to organize the Hindu March, which calls for a march in standing up and in solidarity for their ability to live safely and peacefully in Leicester and to not be cowed out of the area. They asked for two chants, Jai Shri Ram, and forgive me, I forget the name of the other chant, but it was about bringing peace and security. And their understanding and explanation for Jai Shri Ram was about a praise to their God. So we saw chants from both sides. We saw Takbir Allahu Akbar, we saw Jai Shri Ram. So we saw chants pertaining to God on both sides with these marches. So we came to a conclusion with these young men that they had been falsely accused of RSS. They didn't know what it was. They actually kept calling it RRS. They couldn't even pronounce it properly. They had absolutely no understanding. They said that they had nothing to do with Modi and the BJP, and they'd been falsely accused, which it was replicated in the Channel 4 interview. So these young men, falsely accused, then face attack, stabbing, and what was an attack on the Hindu community for about 10 days in Leicester, ahead of the marching. Attacks on cars with Hindu symbols, attacks on doors with Hindu symbols, a real agitation against the Hindu community relating to, I say again, the Hindu festivals, the noise, the antisocial behavior, and the clashing between this Muslim and Hindu youth that was happening from both sides. So the conclusion that we really draw before we move on to the nefarious actors that then came in and whipped up more hatred and more threat against the community. The conclusion we draw at this stage, so there is a religious prejudice between the youth. There is a micro community cohesion breakdown that needs to be addressed. Elements of territorial issues, elements about noise control and antisocial behavior that needs to be taken into consideration by the police and local authorities. But this is then falsely dressed up as RSS terrorism and Hindutva extremism and Hindutva extremist organizations active in Leicester. And this is where we see these, we describe them as influencers, and we discuss Majid Freeman and Mohammed Hijab in particular, essentially grabbing the microphone and running with this idea of Hindutva extremism and RSS terrorism. This is concerning because the individuals in question, one has reportedly given prayers to the brother of an ISIS fighter. Freeman has given prayers to the Taliban, and yet he is being picked up again and again and again by mainstream press, and eventually, most concerning of all, by the city mayor, who is helping to convene and set up the independent inquiry into what happened in Leicester. So we fast forward then into the end of September, where we've seen the press coverage of the issue, where we've seen who is being given the platform to speak. And the real concern, concluding concern of this report, is the level to which we indulged those who have expressed very concerning views that are against our British values, allowed them a platform that has brought risk and fear among the Hindu community, and left us in a situation where we don't trust the independence of the review that should be coming out at the end of this year. And that really is a summary of the journey, of the key pieces of evidence.